The national security system of the United States is broken, but it is fixable. Recent setbacks provide compelling evidence that our current national security system is not prepared for 21st century challenges. Just in the last 6 or 7 years, if we look at the terrorist attacks of 9/11, or the troubled stability operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, or the inadequate response to Hurricane Katrina, we get a sense of the inability of the system. But these setbacks are not coincidental. They are evidence of a system failure. As John McLaughlin mentioned, the world for which the national security system was created in 1947 no longer exists. The challenges to this system have been magnified in recent years because of two factors. One is the growing complexity of the international security environment. And the second factor is the rapidity of change. And if those of us who have been studying the national security system have come to a frightening conclusion. And that is that the gap between the demands that are being placed upon the system and the system's capacity and speed is widening. That gap is widening. Now, as I start my remarks, there's a hugely important point that I need to make. When we talk about the dysfunction or the disorganization of the national security system, we are not talking about the lack of skills or dedication by our national security professionals. The people who are working in our system are working incredibly hard and with unsurpassed dedication. In many cases, they are absolutely being crushed by their workload. The problem that we are confronting is that the system is so dysfunctional that it is wasting much of their hard work. Those of you who've worked in the national security system know how much effort we have to make in terms of the human capital input just to get a very small return. And we need to do something about this, to give these dedicated public servants a system in which their work can produce the results that their efforts deserve. When I said that the system is broken, but that it can be fixed, I say so with the knowledge that it has been done before with problems of great magnitude. There's been mention of my work on the Goldwater-Nichols Department of Defense Reorganization Act. And that effort produced the world's premier joint warfighting force. It enabled forces from the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps to fight as one team, regardless of the mission. We need similar teamwork between our departments and agencies that are part of the national security system. And it's the lack of this teamwork that is causing many of the problems that we've experienced. In the project on national security reform, we're using the same methodology that the Congress applied in the Goldwater-Nichols Act. First and foremost is the need to identify what's wrong. What are the problems? And in this project, we've been working since September 2006. And almost all of that time has been spent on this issue of what are the problems and what are their causes. We spent lots of time trying to understand how did we get to where we are today. What has been the history of the organization? To examine the assumptions under which our organizations have been built and are operating. Most of those assumptions are never explicitly examined, and we're trying to do that. Then we're spending a tremendous amount of time trying to describe the problem. Most government reform and reorganization efforts spend very little time examining what's wrong and spend a great deal of time designing grand solutions. And we're doing the reverse. We are really working this subject to find out exactly what is wrong with this system, so that when we propose make our recommendations, that we will truly fix what is troubling the national security system. There's also a need, after we've identified the problem, is to identify the causes, because in many cases there can be 5 or 6 causes of a particular problem. And here we have to get beyond symptoms. Symptoms are the things that we can visibly observe, but we need to get beyond those symptoms to identify the problems and then the causes. And I like to liken this to the fact that if we have a patient that has 104-degree temperature, we can see that 104-degree temperature, but we need to get beyond that to figure out what the fundamental disease is. And then in our project, we're looking at all elements of organizational effectiveness. Often in our reform efforts, we only look at the structural component. And if you look at some of the recent reforms, they have been very detailed on structural components, but they don't look at the other items. In our project, we're looking at vision, we're looking at processes, we are looking at structure, but we're looking at the core competencies of our organizations. We're looking at staff skills and incentives. And right now, all of the incentives are going in the wrong direction. They're not, the people that are working in our system don't have the right incentives. We're looking at the subject of leadership behavior. And then we're looking at the topic of organizational strategy. How do we carry out these missions with our different organizations? The goal of the Project on National Security Reform is approval of a new system early in the next administration. In that regard, we have 3 sets of reforms in mind. First, presidential directives. The next president could begin a new system immediately after the inauguration. It would not have all of the changes that are required, because the president would lack the authority. But there are many things that the president would be able to do with existing authority. The second reform that we have in mind is the new National Security Act, which we're hoping the next president will propose to the Congress for its consideration. And then the last item that we have in mind is amendments to the rules of the Senate and House of Representatives. Our reforms will be incomplete, imperfect in the executive branch without parallel reforms on Capitol Hill. Right now, the Congress is as stovepiped as the executive branch. It has committees with narrow jurisdiction, so it can do the parts, but it cannot look across the national security system at the broader missions. It has been mentioned that John McLaughlin and myself and Ken Weinstein from Hudson are part of the guiding coalition of the project. Inside of the case studies volume, you have the full list of our guiding coalition. Brent Scowcroft and Tom Pickering and Duke Gingrich, General Jim Jones, Admiral Etienne Bastiani, Admiral Denny Blair, quite a collection of people with great expertise. And I think our ability to recruit this first-rate team to work so hard in this subject is a clear indication how many people here in Washington understand the fundamental brokenness of the national security system. As was mentioned, we will have our recommendations prepared in the coming months. And we will initiate our efforts with the President-elect and his team and with the congressional leadership to have these ideas worked upon. But after the release of our report, we're not finished. The project is going to be ongoing. We will go out with a major effort to reach out to other parts of the national security community to look for insights and ideas there.